Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Bruce Marks, CEO and founder of NACA, thank you so much for being on the Mike Litton Experience. We really appreciate you, buddy. I know you're busy. I know you've got a lot on your plate. Like we talked about, everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And the idea behind it is this. We know, Bruce, that people are going to hear your story, and they're going to be inspired and motivated when they hear your story. They're going to connect with you somehow, and it's going to inspire them and motivate them to do things that they might not have otherwise done. And that's what we're all about. Okay. So with your permission, can we start with the very beginning? Where were you born?
I was born in New York City.
Okay.
So,
did you grow up in New York City?
No. Actually, I grew up outside of New York, outside of New York City, in Westchester County.
Okay.
So I grew up in Scarsdale.
Okay. Okay.
And lived there. So I had the opportunity to see. So because I was close to New York City, I had a number of friends who were Black, and then who didn't have the same opportunities that I had and that the people around me had. And then I saw, the people around me who were overwhelmingly white had, more opportunities, even though they might have been not the brightest lights, but because of where they were and their back and where they're growing up, they had the opportunities. And if they weren't very good, then they would go into marketing, So that was the safety net for, people who, grew up in, upper middle class environment.
I got you.
So I was able to see the sense of entitlement and the lack of opportunities and the contrast between the two. And then, I'm a product of fighting for economic justice, raised civil rights in the 1970s, and here we are today.
So what was your favorite thing about growing up in the Scarsdale area?
Never asked me that. What was my favorite thing? I think, you had the opportunity to play a lot of different sports.
Okay.
And frankly, you could walk around, in the neighborhood, you go to everybody's house and knock, you didn't have to make an appointment or schedule anything. You just, hang out on the block and, cause some trouble and or just have fun. So, it was a neighborhood piece.
It was a good place to grow up.
Yeah. I don't think it had any kind of lasting impact in that. It was, uneventful. And I guess there's
growing up, who was the most influential person to you growing up?
That was my aunt, Esther Ross. So she was, living in New York City. She was involved in the politics in New York and fighting for economic justice. And so she was had a huge influence on my life.
So she was kind of a lightning rod, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And so I love going down, spending time with her. I think they lived on West 96th Street back then, and just hanging out and going there and just spending the night and hanging out and just talking to her and seeing what she's doing and just, talk about politics and talk about what was going on in New York City.
Oh, that's awesome. So you grow up in Scarsdale, you graduate high school there, right? Do you
No,
go,
no.
what happens after that?
Actually, my parents, they ended up moving to Greenwich, Connecticut,
Okay,
and I, ended up, and ended up going to Greenwich High School,
okay,
and in Greenwich High School there were three grades. Each one had 1,000 kids in,
wow,
and so the wealthy kids went to the private schools, and the ones who didn't were in the top tier. So I was in the third tier. I was in the lowest tier.
okay,
So I was with the kids who's lived in Coscob and some of the areas, and the kids whose parents were the service workers
right,
for the wealthy people in Greenwich. And so we were part of the third tier who was never going to be successful, who were relegated to the service jobs and
okay,
relegated to other jobs, but not as part of the elite. So there were 1,000 kids in the class. I saw just a small subsection of that group. And but the one course I took that was the most effective was typing. So
I
they
got you.
had not advanced anything, the lowest level. So when someone says, well, you went to Greenwich, well, Greenwich High School, it is the public school and relegated to the third tier.
I got you. I got you. So a little bit of that gap, right? A little bit of that sort of inequity gap, I guess is the best way to put it, right?
Yeah, I
So
mean,
you got a chance to see that growing up. So you graduate Greenwich High School. What happens then?
Ended up going to UConn, University of Connecticut at
Okay.
Stillwater.
Okay.
My grades weren't good enough, even though I was in the third tier, but a tennis player. So I got there on my tennis.
There you go.
So I played number one at UConn on the tennis team, and
Okay.
that's how I got there.
I got you.
And then there I spent I ended up spending a year in London on your junior year abroad.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to the University of London.
Okay.
So I get to London. I think I'm going there, and I figured out that it was a mistake. I'm going to the City University of London.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Big difference.
Big difference. Yeah.
The City University of London is an engineering school. So I go there, and then I said, okay, I am going to be studying political science.
Okay.
So I go to a few of the classes, and it is your extreme Trotskyite, your extreme left.
Yeah.
I didn't understand a thing of what they were doing,
Oh
but
my
I had
gosh.
a time for a year in London during that time. And I, come on back to UConn, and they say, well, you spent a year in London and they passed you, because these are you're far left, so they pass you for doing nothing.
Right.
Well, how are we going to grade you? I said, well, it's in London. It's at the University of London.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got all straight A's for having a great time in London for the year.
Wow. Sounds like it was pretty fun.
It was.
Awesome. Awesome. So you graduate UConn.
Yes.
What was your favorite thing about going to school at UConn?
Oh, that I could spend a year in London.
That was your favorite? Okay. That was your highlight? Cool.
Favorite thing. I mean, you have to understand. So I get to UConn, and I'm a freshman, and my roommate is the big drug dealer. He has crates of marijuana. I mean, crates of marijuana.
Oh my gosh. Now we know why it was so much fun.
He says to me that, and I'm just a young kid, so
yeah.
So he says to me, you say anything and you're dead, right? Yeah. So it was pretty intense, yeah. The drug dealer in UConn. But he was caught eventually, and he was thrown out. But no, I mean, it's they had the beer fest and they had all that. I wasn't a great student.
No,
you
that's
know,
cool. Well, you had a good
but-
time. That's cool. And that was your highlight, right, of your collegiate career. So you leave UConn. Where do you go?
In really my last semester, I am an LBJ scholar with Stuart McKinney, with Congressman McKinney.
Okay.
So I do that, and then I stay down in Washington, and I got a job at the Department of Energy
Okay.
under President Carter. So I did that for about a year, for a couple of years actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go to business school. So I go to NYU, New York University, and I do a joint degree in business and politics.
Okay.
That was really interesting because the business was really pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
The politics was hard because you actually had to think. So when people give a lot of credence to people who do an MBA, what are you going to learn doing an MBA? Internal rate of return, all that. But what's interesting is that's at NYU is the training ground for your, people working Wall Street.
Okay.
And they would have Wall Street executives, these corporate executives come and speak. So that's where I learned the enemy. So I said I wanted to learn the enemy better than they know themselves.
Okay.
And that's what I did. So, it was good. It was, the politics was pretty intense. The business was pretty easy.
Okay.
But the best course I took when I was at NYU was an accounting course. They gave us 5. They gave us 5 corporations.
Okay.
We went belly up, 2 were doing good, and 1 was on the verge. And they said, here's the public information, the 10Ks, the prospectuses, the annual reports, all that. And they said, figure that out.
Okay.
So that was really educational because, that's how when you go after these targets and you go after these big companies, if you really analyze that stuff, it tells the story.
True.
It tells the true story. And really learn from that. And then, we had debate classes, and that was pretty interesting. And so I was there. And then, what do you do after that? So, I had applied for some banks because I wanted to get on the inside to learn these banks and their operations. So I applied to Mellon Bank, was rejected because the feedback was I didn't wear the appropriate suits. So they gave me the business card for someone at Barney's in New York City. Go and talk to him to wear the right attire.
Wow.
But so then I do an interview at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And actually, I had mismatched my jacket and my pants on that interview, but I got that job.
Oh, wow.
But I had caused some trouble at NYU because I did this thing called Substitute Santa.
Okay.
And Leslie, you remember back then, I don't know whether you remember back then, but at that point, Johnny Carson would read letters that kids write to Santa Claus.
Yep, I remember those. Yeah.
And if you go to the post office, to the New York City post office, they would stack these letters.
Mm-hmm.
Just you'd read them, and kids would read Santa Claus saying, "I'm not going to have any presents, or my parents are in this circumstance." So I started doing Substitute Santa, where we would take the letters and we would have, we'd get some money from the students, or they bring gifts and all that.
Mm-hmm.
In the last year, I think we did way over 1,000 letters.
Wow.
And we we would actually go to the homes, to the apartments, and we would deliver them. So I was just going around harassing the students and everybody I could think of to raise sponsor, give money, bring toys.
Well, that's not a bad reason to harass somebody.
No, I've been going after and really harassing or do whatever the right term is for many years or decades.
Yeah, ever since, right? That's awesome, man. So so you leave NYU and you go to work at the Federal Reserve. I'll bet that was eye-opening.
So I was in that's the second district. So I was in the domestic applications area.
Okay.
So in that department, that is the focal point of everybody, of all the institutions that want to do other activities, they want to merge or acquire, they come through our department.
Okay.
So we would do the analysis, we would get the legal evaluation, and then you would evaluate them, which was the CAMEL analysis. You would look at the capital, asset, management, equity, liquidity, and you would do that. So it was a big position, but it's also a position that it was the revolving door. You'd work there, and the banks that you would regulate, they would try to hire you. So most of the people there would just do that for a bit, and then they would go and they work for the banks that they would regulate. So they weren't too harsh on those institutions since they were looking for a job there over time.
It was a stepping stone for them, yeah.
It was a stepping stone. So, but I wasn't looking at that. I the position where one of these big banks in New Jersey, they were applying to reacquire another institution, and they had a really poor CRA record. I mean, they were not lending to to the whole community. They weren't lending to people of color,
right?
And given a warning, and they never did anything. So I refused to approve their application, and then I was considered not a team player.
Right, not very popular.
They didn't want to override me, so they put a lot of pressure to for me to change my decision on that. But I wouldn't. So right. I was brought into the vice president's office and saying, you've got to do this, because they didn't want a track record of an analyst saying no and to override it. But so that was interesting, and they had a lot of asbestos there, and my girlfriend at the time was an industrial hygienist, so we were testing for the asbestos, and it was an interesting time.
I'll bet it was.
But one of the best stories was if you go to the Federal Reserve of New York, mm-hmm. There's gold there, or they think that that they have the deposit. So I would ride my bicycle in every day, and I would tie it to the post. And so one day I forgot, I lost my keys, so I couldn't get my bicycle up. So I brought my car in, this old Chevrolet, and I was on the hood of the car pulling the bicycle off of the post. And these guys, some of the security guards come out, their guns, out there saying, trying to get into the Federal Reserve, because here's the car on the sidewalk and all that stuff. So
oh my gosh.
But I learned the enemy, and I went around to these different community organizations, activist organizations. I said, I'm an insider. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have all this confidential information.
Right.
I can really help you guys out. And these groups said, well, can you show that the banks are engaged in racist, discriminatory lending practices? I said, no, it's not so easy to show that, but I can show you where their vulnerabilities are. insider trading, violations, and I can show you where the weak points are. They weren't interested. I said, well, if you're going to take on these entities, you're not going to always get right to the one issue that you want to focus on. You got to find out where they're vulnerable.
Right.
And they're vulnerable, but they weren't keen on that.
So you learned how to figure out where their weak spot was.
Absolutely.
And then eventually it sounds like you could exploit it.
Everyone is doing something illegal.
Yeah.
Everyone. You just have to look,
Yeah.
And insider trading, things they don't have the rights to do, or they weren't licensed to do, or, you got to, every one of them is in violation. You just got to dig and, look to see where those things are. Find.
Gotta look hard enough.
Find, their vulnerabilities.
So how long were you with the Federal Reserve?
For about 2.5 years.
Okay. And this was when? What year?
I graduated. Boy, graduated. That was in 82 to 84.
Okay, so during the Reagan administration.
Yeah.
I got you. I bet that was an interesting time on Wall Street. Wow.
So you sort of go back and so between the regulators,
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.